Imagine living in a place where only you can hear a sound that doesn't exist. A low, persistent hum that follows you everywhere, driving you to the edge of sanity. Welcome to Taos, New Mexico, where the impossible became reality. This is the story of the Taos hum, one of the most baffling acoustic mysteries in modern history. For over 3 decades, scientists, government agencies, and desperate residents have searched for answers to a phenomenon that challenges everything we think we know about sound, perception, and reality itself. What you're about to discover will make you question whether the world around you is exactly as it seems, or if there are hidden forces at work that only a chosen few are sensitive enough to detect. The story begins in the early 1990s, in the high desert of northern New Mexico, where the artistic community of Taos nestles against the backdrop of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It was here that residents began reporting something extraordinary and deeply unsettling. They described hearing a low-frequency droning sound, persistent and inescapable, like a distant diesel engine that never turns off. But here's the terrifying part. When they searched for the source, they found nothing. No machinery, no vehicles, no obvious explanation for what was driving them slowly mad. The phenomenon was so localized and so bizarre that it caught the attention of national media, scientists, and eventually, the United States government itself. But before we dive into the investigations and theories, let me tell you about the people who live with this mysterious sound every single day. Picture this. You're trying to fall asleep in your quiet mountain home, but there's this constant, low rumbling that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. You check outside, no trucks, no construction, no obvious source. You ask your neighbors, but most of them look at you like you've lost your mind because they can't hear anything at all. This is the reality for approximately 2% of Taos residents who experience what locals simply call the hum. The sound is typically described as a low-pitched droning or humming noise, similar to a large truck idling in the distance or a diesel generator running somewhere just out of sight. But what makes it truly maddening is its persistence. It never stops. It never fades. It's always there, lurking at the edge of perception. For those who can hear it, the hum isn't just an annoyance, it's a life-altering experience. That can lead to chronic headaches, insomnia, anxiety, and in some extreme cases, complete psychological breakdown. Joe Mullins, a resident who moved to Taos in 1991, described his first encounter with the as feeling like someone was running a massive engine somewhere underground, and it was, making the whole world vibrate. He spent months searching for the source, driving around town at all hours, following power lines, checking industrial sites, convinced he would eventually track down whatever was creating this infernal noise. But the more he searched, the more frustrated he became, because the hum seemed to follow him everywhere within the Taos area, yet completely disappeared when he traveled just a few miles outside of town. This geographical specificity is one of the most puzzling aspects of the Taos hum phenomenon. The sound appears to be largely contained within a specific area around Taos, roughly corresponding to a valley formation created by the surrounding mountains. But even within this zone, not everyone can hear it, leading to a division between hearers and non-hearers that has created tension and skepticism within the community. The first documented reports of the hum began appearing in local newspapers in the early 1990s, but it's likely the phenomenon existed for much longer. Many longtime residents, when interviewed, recalled similar experiences going back to the 1980s or even earlier, but dismissed them as isolated incidents or blamed them on specific industrial activities. It wasn't until 1993 that the reports became so numerous and consistent that they attracted serious attention from outside investigators. The breakthrough came when a group of frustrated residents decided to organize and document their experiences systematically. Led by a retired electronics engineer named Bill Watterson, they created detailed logs of when they heard the hum, its intensity, its characteristics, and any patterns they could identify. What they discovered was remarkable. Despite being scattered across the Taos area and having no contact with each other initially, the hearers were reporting remarkably similar experiences. The sound was consistently described as low frequency, between 32 and 80 hertz, with most people placing it around 56 hertz. It was more noticeable at night and in quiet indoor environments. It seemed to be louder during certain weather conditions, particularly during high-pressure systems. Most intriguingly, it appeared to be more intense for people who were particularly sensitive to electromagnetic fields or had certain types of hearing damage. Armed with this data, Watterson and his group approached local authorities, demanding an investigation. The initial response was predictable skepticism, but the sheer number of reports and the consistency of the descriptions eventually forced officials to take the matter seriously. In 1993, the story broke nationally when a team from the television program Unsolved Mysteries visited Taos to investigate the hum. The episode brought international attention to the phenomenon and triggered a flood of similar reports from other locations around the world. But more importantly, it put pressure on scientific and government institutions to provide real answers to the mystery. The first major scientific investigation was launched in 1994 by a team from the University of New Mexico, led by acoustic engineer Dr. James Kelly. Kelly approached the problem with the methodical precision of a true scientist, setting up sophisticated monitoring equipment throughout the Taos area to detect and analyze any low-frequency sound phenomena. What he found was both validating and deeply puzzling. The equipment did detect low-frequency acoustic energy in the range described by the hearers. These weren't imagined sounds or psychological phenomena. There was measurable acoustic activity occurring in the Taos area. However, the signals were incredibly weak, well below the threshold that most humans should be able to detect. According to conventional acoustic science, the sounds Kelly was measuring should have been completely inaudible to human ears. This discovery led to the first major theory about the hum, that it was a real acoustic phenomenon, but one that could only be perceived by people with unusually sensitive hearing or specific types of hearing damage that made them more susceptible to low-frequency sounds. Kelly's team also made another crucial discovery. The acoustic energy wasn't constant. It followed specific patterns with intensity fluctuations that correlated with atmospheric pressure, solar activity, and even seismic micromovements in the area. This suggested that whatever was causing the hum was influenced by natural phenomena, ruling out simple explanations like industrial machinery or electronic equipment. But Kelly's findings raised more questions than they answered. If the sound was too quiet for most people to hear, why could some individuals detect it so clearly that it disrupted their daily lives? And what was the source of these mysterious low-frequency vibrations that seemed to pulse through the earth itself? The mystery deepened when the U.S. government decided to launch its own investigation. In 1995, a joint task force was established involving researchers from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratories, the U.S. Air Force, and several universities. This was an unprecedented level of government interest in what many still considered local curiosity. The official explanation for the government's involvement was scientific curiosity and concern for public health. But many residents suspected there was more to it than that. Los Alamos National Laboratory, after all, was just 50 miles south of Taos, and the facility had a long history of classified research projects. Could the hum be related to secret experiments or weapons testing? The government task force spent 2 years conducting the most comprehensive investigation of the hum to date. They deployed arrays of seismic monitors, electromagnetic sensors, and acoustic recording equipment throughout northern New Mexico. They interviewed hundreds of hearers and conducted detailed medical examinations to identify any common characteristics. They analyzed satellite imagery, geological surveys, and industrial activity reports. They even investigated possible connections to classified military research projects, though the details of these investigations remain classified to this day. The results, published in 1997, were simultaneously reassuring and frustrating. The task force confirmed that the hum was a real phenomenon, not a case of mass hysteria or psychological suggestion. They identified several potential contributing factors, including atmospheric ducting of distant sounds, seismic activity, and electromagnetic interference from various sources. However, they concluded that no single source could account for all the reported experiences. Most disappointingly, they were unable to provide a definitive explanation for the phenomenon or offer any practical solutions for affected residents. The government report did establish some important facts about the hearers themselves. They tended to be middle-aged or older, with a slight preference for women over men. Many had some form of hearing damage, particularly in the high-frequency range. A surprisingly high percentage worked in technical fields like engineering, telecommunications, or electronics, and almost all reported being particularly sensitive to electromagnetic fields, often complaining about discomfort around power lines, cell towers, and electronic equipment. This last finding led to one of the most intriguing theories about the hum, that it might not be a sound at all, but rather an electromagnetic phenomenon that sensitive individuals perceive as sound. Dr. Sarah Chun, a neurologist at Stanford University who studied the government reports, proposed that the hum might be caused by low-frequency electromagnetic radiation that directly stimulates the auditory nerve, bypassing the normal hearing process entirely. This would explain why the sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, why it can't be blocked by normal soundproofing, and why only certain individuals can detect it. Chun's electromagnetic theory gained support from the fact that many hearers reported the sound was worse near power lines, radio towers, and other sources of electromagnetic radiation. Some even claimed they could make the hum stop temporarily by wrapping their heads in aluminum foil, though this anecdotal evidence was difficult to verify scientifically. But if the hum was electromagnetic in nature, what was generating the radiation? This question led investigators down some very dark and disturbing paths. Los Alamos National Laboratory, located just 50 miles from Taos, has been at the center of classified weapons research since the Manhattan Project. The facility conducts experiments involving high-energy physics, advanced radar systems, and electromagnetic pulse technology. Could the hum be an unintended side effect of secret military research? Some hearers became convinced this was the case, pointing to correlations between the hum's intensity and known periods of increased activity at Los Alamos. They noted that the hum seemed to have started around the same time that Los Alamos began developing new types of radar and communication systems in the late 1980s and early 1990s. However, laboratory officials consistently denied any connection between their research and the hum, and no definitive evidence has ever been produced to support this theory. Another military-related theory focused on the possibility of extremely low frequency communication systems. The U.S. military has long been interested in ELF communications because they can penetrate deep underground and travel vast distances without degradation. Such systems would be invaluable for communicating with submarines or underground. Command centers. Could the hum be interference from classified ELF transmissions? This theory gained credibility when researchers discovered that the hum shared many characteristics with known ELF phenomena. The frequency range was similar. The geographical distribution matched patterns expected. From L-phi propagation and the day-night variations corresponded to known changes in atmospheric conductivity that affect ELF transmission. But like so many other theories about the hum, the ELF explanation couldn't account for all the observed characteristics. If the hum was caused by military communications, why was it so geographically limited? ELF waves can travel thousands of miles, yet the hum seemed to be contained within a relatively small area around Taos. As the government investigation concluded without providing definitive answers, attention turned to other possible explanations. Geologists proposed that the hum might be related to underground seismic activity. The Taos area sits at the intersection of several geological fault systems, and subtle movements in the Earth's crust could potentially generate the types of low-frequency vibrations reported by hearers. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a seismologist from the University of Colorado, spent several years studying microseismic activity in the Taos region. She discovered a pattern of extremely small earthquakes, most too weak to be felt by humans, that occurred regularly throughout the area. These microquakes generated seismic waves in exactly the frequency range associated with the hum. Rodriguez's theory was that sensitive individuals might be detecting these seismic vibrations through bone conduction, perceiving the Earth's movements as sound. This geological explanation had several advantages over previous theories. It could account for the hum's geographical specificity, its correlation with atmospheric pressure changes, and its persistence over many years. However, it still couldn't explain why only some people could detect these vibrations, or why the hum seemed to affect people differently depending on their location within the affected area. As the 1990s drew to a close, the hum had become more than just a local mystery. It had evolved into a symbol of the limitations of human knowledge and the persistence of unexplained phenomena in our modern world. But the story was far from over. In the early 2000s, reports of similar humming phenomena began emerging from other locations around the world. Bristol, England experienced its own version of the hum, affecting thousands of residents in specific neighborhoods. Similar reports came from Auckland, New Zealand, Kokomo, Indiana, and dozens of other locations across 6 continents. This global pattern suggested that whatever was causing these phenomena was not unique to Taos, but rather part of a larger, previously unrecognized aspect of our environment. Dr. Glenn McPherson, a lecturer at the University of British Columbia, began collecting reports of hum phenomena from around the world, creating the first comprehensive database of what he termed the world hum. McPherson's research revealed striking similarities between reports from different locations. The sound characteristics were remarkably consistent: low frequency, persistent, more noticeable at night, and audible only to a small percentage of the population. But he also discovered some important differences. While the Taos hum seemed to be geographically contained, other locations showed different patterns. Some hums were citywide phenomena, others affected only specific neighborhoods, and the Kongchung, few seemed to follow individuals as they moved from place to place. These variations suggested that multiple different mechanisms might be responsible for hum phenomena rather than a single underlying cause. McPherson's work also revealed a disturbing trend. The frequency of hum reports was increasing dramatically. While only a handful of locations reported hum phenomena in the 1990s, By 2010, there were reports from more than 300 locations worldwide. Was this increase real, or simply the result of improved communication and awareness of the phenomenon? Macpherson believed the increase was genuine, and he proposed a controversial theory to explain it. He suggested that the proliferation of electromagnetic devices, cell phones, Wi-Fi, networks, satellite communications, and countless other modern technologies was creating a background of electromagnetic pollution that sensitive individuals were beginning to perceive as sound. This electromagnetic smog theory gained support from the fact that hum reports were most common in developed countries with extensive electronic infrastructure. Rural areas and developing nations with less electromagnetic activity reported fewer hum phenomena. Additionally, many hearers reported that their symptoms worsened over time, paralleling the expansion of electronic communication systems. But Macpherson's theory faced significant challenges. If electromagnetic pollution was the cause, why did the phenomena remain geographically localized in places like Taos? And why did only a tiny percentage of the population seem to be affected when everyone is exposed to the same electromagnetic environment? These questions led to perhaps the most controversial theory about the hum, that it might be a biological rather than physical phenomenon. Dr. James Lynn, a biomedical engineer at the University of Illinois, proposed that some individuals might have developed a sensitivity to electromagnetic fields that allows them to detect signals that are normally below the threshold of human perception. Lynn's research showed that electromagnetic fields can indeed stimulate the human nervous system under certain conditions. Strong magnetic fields can cause people to see flashing lights and specific radio frequencies can cause a heating sensation in skin tissue. Could it be that some individuals have developed, either naturally or through environmental exposure, an enhanced sensitivity that allows them to perceive electromagnetic phenomena as sound? This biological sensitivity theory could explain many of the puzzling aspects of the hum. It would account for why only certain people can hear it, why the phenomenon seems to follow hearers when they move, and why the experience is so difficult to measure with conventional equipment. It might also explain why hearers often report other types of electromagnetic sensitivity, such as discomfort around power lines and electronic devices. However, the biological theory raised disturbing questions about the long-term health effects of electromagnetic exposure. If some people were developing enhanced sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, what did that mean for their health? And if electromagnetic pollution was increasing worldwide, would more people develop this sensitivity over time? These concerns became more pressing when researchers began studying the health impacts experienced by hum hearers. Dr. Patricia Williams, an epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins University, conducted the first comprehensive health study of people who experience hum phenomena. Her findings were alarming. Hearers showed significantly higher rates of sleep disorders, chronic headaches, tinnitus, and anxiety compared to the general population. Many reported difficulty concentrating, memory problems, and a general decline in quality of life. Some had become so desperate to escape the hum that they had moved multiple times, sometimes relocating hundreds of miles, only to find that they carried their acoustic torment with them. Williams' study also revealed a troubling pattern. The health effects seemed to worsen over time. People who had been hearing the hum for many years showed more severe symptoms than recent hearers. This progression suggested that prolonged exposure to whatever was causing the hum might have cumulative health consequences. But perhaps the most disturbing finding was the psychological impact. Many hearers reported feeling isolated and misunderstood, frustrated by the inability of others to perceive what they experienced so clearly. Some had been dismissed by doctors as hypochondriacs, or told their symptoms were purely psychological. This dismissal often led to depression and, in extreme cases, thoughts of suicide. The psychological burden was compounded by the mystery surrounding the phenomenon. Unlike other environmental health problems, hearers had no clear enemy to fight, no obvious source to eliminate, no treatment protocol to follow. They were left to cope with a problem that science couldn't explain and medicine couldn't treat. As we moved into the 2010s, the hum had become more than just an acoustic mystery. It had evolved into a symbol of the hidden costs of modern technological civilization. Meanwhile, back in Taos, the original hearers continued their struggle with the persistent droning sound that had started it all. Some had found ways to cope, using white noise machines, meditation techniques, or changes in lifestyle that seemed to reduce their sensitivity. Others had simply learned to live with the hum as a constant companion, accepting it as an unavoidable part of their environment. But a dedicated group of researchers and hearers refused to give up the search for answers. In 2015, a new investigation was launched by an international team of scientists, funded by private donations from people around the world who had experienced hum phenomena. This investigation, known as the World Hum Project, took advantage of advances in technology that weren't available to earlier researchers. Modern digital sensors could detect and analyze sounds with unprecedented precision. Satellite monitoring systems could track atmospheric and electromagnetic conditions on a global scale. Advanced computer modeling could process vast amounts of data to identify patterns that might have been missed by earlier studies. The World Hum Project also benefited from the Internet Age phenomenon of citizen science. Thousands of hearers from around the world contributed detailed reports of their experiences, creating the largest database of hum phenomena ever assembled. This crowdsourced approach revealed new patterns that had never been noticed before. For example, researchers discovered that hum reports showed distinct seasonal variations, with more intense experiences during certain months of the year. They found correlations with solar activity, atmospheric pressure systems, and even lunar phases. Most intriguingly, they identified specific demographic and genetic factors that seemed to predispose individuals to becoming hearers. The genetic research was led by Dr. Jennifer Chong at MIT, who conducted DNA analysis on volunteers who experienced hum phenomena. Chong's team discovered that hearers were statistically more likely to carry certain genetic variants that affected inner ear development and neural processing of sound. These genetic differences might explain why only a small percentage of the population can perceive hum phenomena, even when exposed to identical environmental conditions. But the genetic findings also raised ethical questions. If some people were genetically predisposed to electromagnetic sensitivity, did society have a responsibility to protect them from harmful exposures? And if the number of sensitive individuals was increasing over time, either through genetic changes or environmental factors, what would that mean for public health policy? These questions became more urgent when the World Hum Project published its preliminary findings in 2018. The data showed that hum phenomena were not random occurrences, but followed predictable patterns related to electromagnetic infrastructure, geological activity, and atmospheric conditions. The researchers had identified several hum hotspots around the world where multiple factors seemed to converge to create optimal conditions for the phenomenon. Taos, New Mexico, remained one of the most active hotspots, but it was joined by locations in England, Australia, New Zealand, and several other countries. Each hotspot had its own unique characteristics, but all shared certain common features. They were located in areas with complex geology, significant electromagnetic activity, and specific atmospheric conditions that could amplify or focus low-frequency phenomena. The World Hum Project's findings suggested that the hum was not a single phenomenon, but rather a family of related phenomena that could be triggered by different combinations of environmental factors. This explained why previous investigations had struggled to find a single universal explanation. In Taos, the primary factors appeared to be a combination of geological activity and HOSI, electromagnetic interference from multiple sources. In other locations, different combinations of factors created similar perceptual experiences. But even with these advances in understanding, the fundamental mystery remained. What exactly were hearers perceiving, and why were only some people able to detect it? The answer might lie in recent discoveries about the human brain's remarkable ability to adapt and change. Neuroplasticity research has shown that the brain can reorganize itself in response to environmental pressures, developing new sensitivities and capabilities. Dr. Michael Torres, a neurologist at the University of California, San Francisco, proposed that some individuals might have developed enhanced sensitivity to environmental stimuli as an adaptive response to modern technological environments. Torres suggested that hearers might represent an evolutionary adaptation to our increasingly electromagnetic world, developing sensory capabilities that allow them to detect environmental changes that other people cannot perceive. This evolutionary theory was controversial but compelling. It suggested that rather than being victims of a mysterious phenomenon, hearers might be harbingers of human adaptation to modern environmental conditions. Their sensitivity might be providing early warning signals about environmental changes that could eventually affect everyone. This perspective reframed the hum from a mysterious affliction to a potential survival mechanism. But it also raised troubling questions about what environmental changes hearers might be detecting. Were they sensing increasing levels of electromagnetic pollution, geological instability, atmospheric changes related to climate change, or something else entirely that science hadn't yet recognized? As we entered the 2020s, these questions became more pressing when reports of hum phenomena began increasing dramatically during the global pandemic. Researchers initially thought this might be related to reduced industrial noise, making the more noticeable. But the pattern was more complex than that. Many new hearers emerged during lockdowns, reporting their first experiences with mysterious humming sounds. Existing hearers often reported that their symptoms intensified during periods of isolation. Some researchers speculated that stress and lifestyle changes might have made more people sensitive to environmental stimuli they had previously ignored. Others wondered if the reduced electromagnetic activity from decreased commercial and industrial operations had somehow made other sources of electromagnetic radiation more prominent. But the most intriguing theory came from Dr. Lisa Park, a psychoacoustic researcher, Stanford University. Park proposed that the pandemic had created ideal conditions for people to become aware of environmental sounds and sensations they had always been exposed to, but had previously filtered out. In the quiet of lockdown, without the usual distractions of modern life, people might have become more attuned to subtle environmental phenomena that had always been present. This awareness threshold theory suggested that the hum and similar phenomena might be much more common than previously thought, but that most people simply don't notice them under normal circumstances. Park's research team conducted experiments using sensory deprivation techniques to test this hypothesis. They found that when placed in extremely quiet environments for extended periods, a significant percentage of test subjects began reporting perception of low-frequency sounds that weren't detectable with conventional equipment. These laboratory-induced experiences shared many characteristics with naturally occurring hum phenomena, suggesting that the capacity to perceive these sounds might be latent in many people. This finding revolutionized thinking about the hum and similar phenomena. Rather than being a rare condition affecting a small number of sensitive individuals, hum perception might be a normal human capability that has been suppressed by the noise and distraction of modern life. If this theory was correct, it implied that our ancestors might have been much more aware of subtle environmental phenomena than we are today. Traditional cultures often speak of being able to sense changes in the earth, the weather, and the spiritual world through subtle signs that modern people cannot detect. Could hearers be recovering ancient human sensitivities that we have lost through our immersion in artificial environments? This possibility led to a fascinating collaboration between hum researchers and anthropologists studying traditional ecological knowledge. They discovered that many indigenous cultures have concepts and vocabulary for phenomena that sound remarkably similar to modern hum experiences. The Hopi people of the American Southwest, for example, have traditional knowledge about earth songs that are said to indicate changes in the natural world. Aboriginal Australian cultures speak of country singing, the ability to hear the voice of the land itself. These traditional concepts suggest that sensitivity to subtle environmental phenomena has been recognized throughout human history, but may have been dismissed or forgotten by scientific culture. The intersection of ancient wisdom and modern mystery became even more intriguing when researchers discovered that many hum hotspots were located in areas that indigenous cultures considered to be spiritually or energetically significant. Taos itself is situated in an area that has been considered sacred by Pueblo peoples for thousands of years. The land around Taos Pueblo is believed to be particularly sensitive to spiritual and natural forces. Could there be a connection between these traditional beliefs and the modern phenomenon of the hum? Dr. Maria Gonzalez, an anthropologist who specializes in indigenous knowledge systems, spent several years studying this question. She worked closely with tribal elders and traditional knowledge keepers to understand how indigenous cultures perceive and interpret environmental phenomena that mainstream science struggles to explain. Gonzalez discovered that traditional cultures often have sophisticated understanding of subtle environmental changes that can indicate shifts in geological, atmospheric, or electromagnetic conditions. These traditional knowledge systems recognize that certain locations are natural amplifiers or conductors of environmental energy, creating zones where sensitive individuals can perceive phenomena that are undetectable elsewhere. The correlation between sacred sites and hum hotspots suggested that indigenous peoples may have identified these locations precisely because they were places where the boundary between the physical and metaphysical worlds became permeable. This perspective offered a radically different way of understanding the hum, not as a hum, not as a technological malfunction or environmental pollutant, but as a natural feature of certain landscapes. That has existed for millennia. But if the hum was a natural phenomenon, why was it becoming more prominent now? Gonzalez's research with tribal elders revealed a disturbing pattern. Many indigenous communities reported that traditional environmental sensitivities were becoming stronger and more widespread among their people. Elders who had always been able to sense changes in the natural world were experiencing these sensitivities with unprecedented intensity. Young people who had never shown signs of environmental sensitivity were suddenly developing the ability to perceive subtle changes in their surroundings. The tribal communities interpreted this as a sign that the earth itself was experiencing unprecedented stress and was calling out for attention through those who could still hear its voice. This indigenous perspective aligned remarkably well with scientific theories about increasing electromagnetic pollution and environmental degradation. Could it be that the hum represented the Earth's attempt to communicate distress to those humans who still retained the sensitivity to listen? This possibility gained support from the discovery that hum phenomena often intensified during periods of environmental stress. Hearers reported stronger and more persistent humming sounds during droughts, before earthquakes, and during periods of high solar activity. Some even claimed they could predict weather changes or natural disasters based on variations in the hum's intensity and character. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a geophysicist at the University of New Mexico, decided to test these claims scientifically. She worked with a group of experienced hearers to monitor their perceptions alongside sophisticated geological and atmospheric monitoring equipment. Over the course of 3 years, Vasquez documented dozens of cases where hearers reported significant changes in the hum hours or even days before measurable environmental changes occurred. In some instances, hearers detected the subtle precursors to minor earthquakes that seismic equipment missed entirely. They sensed atmospheric pressure changes that preceded weather systems by longer margins than conventional meteorological forecasting could achieve. Most remarkably, several hearers accurately predicted the timing and intensity of solar storms that affected electromagnetic communications worldwide. These findings suggested that rather than being victims of a mysterious affliction, hearers might possess a valuable early warning system for environmental changes. But the implications were troubling as well as fascinating. If the hum was indeed a signal of environmental distress, what did its increasing prevalence and intensity indicate about the state of our planet? Were hearers detecting the subtle signs of ecological collapse that conventional instruments couldn't yet measure? These questions became more urgent as reports of hum phenomena continued to increase worldwide. By 2022, the World Hum Project database contained reports from more than 1,000 locations across all inhabited continents. The phenomenon was no longer a curiosity limited to a few scattered communities. It had become a global concern affecting hundreds of thousands of people. More troubling still, the health effects reported by hearers were becoming more severe. Long-term studies showed that people who had been experiencing hum phenomena for many years were developing increasingly serious symptoms. Chronic insomnia, severe headaches, cognitive difficulties, and psychological distress were becoming commonplace among the hearer community. Some individuals had become so disabled by their symptoms that they could no longer work or maintain normal social relationships. A lack of effective treatments made the situation even more desperate. Conventional medicine had little to offer beyond symptomatic relief for anxiety and sleep disorders. Sound masking devices provided temporary relief for some, but the underlying phenomenon persisted unchanged. A few hearers found that relocating to remote areas with minimal electromagnetic infrastructure could reduce their symptoms, but this was not a practical solution for most people. As the hearer community grew larger and more organized, they began advocating for recognition of their condition as a legitimate environmental health issue. They pushed for research funding, medical attention, and legal protections against electromagnetic pollution. But they faced significant obstacles from skeptical scientists, unsympathetic government agencies, and powerful technology industries that had financial interests in maintaining the status quo. The battle over recognition of electromagnetic sensitivity as a legitimate health condition became a microcosm of larger conflicts between technological progress and human health, between corporate profits and environmental protection. Meanwhile, in Taos, the original epicenter of hum research, a new generation of investigators was pursuing fresh approaches to the mystery. Dr. James Morrison, a quantum physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, proposed that the hum might be related to quantum mechanical phenomena that conventional physics couldn't adequately explain. Morrison's theory was based on recent discoveries about quantum entanglement and non-local correlations that suggested reality might be far stranger and more interconnected than classical physics assumed. He proposed that hearers might be detecting quantum fluctuations in the fabric of fabric, space-time itself, variations so subtle that they existed at the boundary between classical and quantum reality. This quantum theory could potentially explain many of the puzzling aspects of the hum that had frustrated previous investigators. It would account for why the phenomenon seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere at once, why it couldn't be blocked by conventional barriers, and why only certain individuals could perceive it. If the hum was indeed a quantum phenomenon, it would represent a form of perception that transcended the normal limitations of classical physics. Morrison's ideas were highly speculative and controversial, but they attracted attention from researchers who had become frustrated with the limitations of conventional approaches. A small but dedicated group of physicists, neuroscientists, and consciousness researchers began exploring the possibility that hum phenomena might be evidence of human consciousness, interacting directly with quantum fields. This research took place at the very edges of accepted science in the controversial territory where physics meets consciousness studies and where rigorous methodology encounters profound mystery. But even as scientists pushed the boundaries of theoretical understanding, hearers continued to struggle with the practical reality of living with the hum. Support groups formed in communities around the world, providing psychological assistance and practical advice for coping with the phenomenon. Online forums connected hearers across vast distances, creating a global community of people united by their shared experience of an invisible and largely unrecognized condition. These communities became laboratories for developing coping strategies and treatments that conventional medicine couldn't provide. Hearers experimented with dietary changes, meditation practices, electromagnetic shielding techniques, and alternative healing approaches. Some found relief through yoga and mindfulness practices that seemed to reduce their sensitivity to environmental stimuli. Others discovered that certain nutritional supplements or lifestyle changes could minimize their symptoms. A few reported that learning to embrace the hum rather than fight it transformed their relationship with the phenomenon entirely. These individual success stories provided hope and practical guidance for newly affected hearers, even as the scientific community continued to struggle with fundamental questions about the nature and cause of the phenomenon. As we move deeper into the 2020s, the Taos hum and its global relatives remain one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries of our time. The phenomenon challenges our understanding of sound, perception, health, and the relationship between human consciousness and the environment. It raises profound questions about the hidden costs of technological civilization and the price we pay for immersing ourselves in artificial electromagnetic environments. But perhaps most importantly, the hum reminds us that there are still mysteries in our world that science cannot fully explain, phenomena that exist at the boundaries of human knowledge and experience. For the hearers who live with the hum every day, it is not an abstract scientific puzzle, but a concrete reality that shapes their daily lives and their relationship with the world around them. Their experiences suggest that human perception may be far more sensitive and adaptable than we currently understand, and that some individuals may be developing new forms of environmental awareness in response to rapidly changing conditions on our planet. Whether the hum represents a technological side effect, a natural phenomenon, a health crisis, or something else entirely remains to be determined. But one thing is certain: the mystery of the Taos hum has opened our eyes to the complexity and strangeness of the world we inhabit. It has shown us that beneath the familiar surface of everyday reality lie layers of mystery and possibility that we are only beginning to explore. As technology continues to advance and our environment continues to change, phenomena like the hum may become increasingly common. The question is whether we will develop the wisdom and understanding necessary to navigate these new realities without losing our connection to the natural world that has sustained human life for millennia. The story of the Taos hum is ultimately a story about the intersection of ancient and modern, natural and artificial, known and unknown. It reminds us that we live in a world of infinite complexity and mystery, where the boundaries between science and spirituality, technology and nature, individual experience and collective reality are far more fluid than we often assume. For those who hear the hum, this fluidity is not a philosophical abstraction, but a daily lived experience. They exist at the boundary between worlds, hearing voices that others cannot detect, sensing changes that conventional instruments cannot measure. Their experiences challenge us to expand our understanding of what it means to be human in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. Perhaps the hum is trying to tell us something important about our relationship with the environment, about the consequences of our technological choices, about capacities for perception and awareness that we have forgotten or suppressed. Or perhaps it is simply a reminder that mystery and wonder still exist in our world, that there are phenomena beyond our current ability to explain or control. Whatever the ultimate explanation for the Taos hum, its story serves as a powerful reminder that the world we inhabit is far stranger and more mysterious than we often realize. It challenges us to remain humble in the face of the unknown, curious about phenomena that don't fit our existing categories, and compassionate toward those who experience realities that differ from our own. The residents of Taos who first reported the hum 3 decades ago could never have imagined that their local mystery would become a global phenomenon studied by scientists around the world. They were simply trying to understand a sound that was disrupting their lives and driving them to distraction. But their persistence in seeking answers, their refusal to accept dismissal or ridicule, opened the door to discoveries that have expanded our understanding of human perception, environmental health, and the hidden complexities of our modern world. Today, as thousands of hearers around the world continue to experience mysterious humming sounds, the search for answers continues. New technologies, new theories, and new approaches to the mystery emerge regularly, each adding pieces to a puzzle that remains tantalizingly incomplete. The World Hum Project continues to collect and analyze reports from hearers worldwide, building an ever larger database of experiences and observations. Advanced monitoring systems deployed in hum hotspots around the world continue to gather data on electromagnetic, seismic, and atmospheric conditions. Researchers from dozens of disciplines continue to propose and test new theories about the underlying causes of hum phenomena. But perhaps most importantly, the hearer community itself continues to grow and organize, sharing experiences, supporting each other, and advocating for recognition and research. They serve as living reminders that the hum is not just a scientific curiosity, but a human reality that affects real people in real ways. Their voices ensure that the mystery of the hum remains connected to its human dimension, that the search for answers never loses sight of the people whose lives are shaped by this phenomenon. As we look toward the future, several trends seem likely to influence the ongoing story of the hum. The continued expansion of electromagnetic infrastructure worldwide will create new opportunities to test theories about electromagnetic causes. Climate change and increasing geological instability may create new conditions that amplify or modify hum phenomena. Advances in neuroscience and consciousness research may provide new insights into the perceptual mechanisms that allow some people to detect these mysterious sounds, and the growing recognition of environmental health as a legitimate medical specialty may finally provide hearers with the clinical attention and treatment options they desperately need. But regardless of what future discoveries may reveal about the hum, the phenomenon has already taught us valuable lessons about the nature of mystery, the limits of knowledge, and the importance of listening to experiences that don't fit our preconceived categories. It has shown us that the world we inhabit is far more complex and mysterious than our everyday experience suggests. It has reminded us that human perception may be capable of detecting phenomena that our instruments cannot measure and our theories cannot yet explain. And it has demonstrated that persistent inquiry and open-minded investigation can gradually illuminate even the most puzzling mysteries, even when complete answers remain elusive. The story of the Taos hum is ultimately a story about the human quest for understanding. In the face of the unknown, it celebrates the courage of individuals who refuse to accept dismissal of their experiences, the dedication of researchers who pursued unconventional theories, and the power of scientific inquiry to gradually expand the boundaries of knowledge. But it also acknowledges the limits of that knowledge and the importance of remaining humble in the face of phenomena that challenge our existing understanding. As you go about your daily life, perhaps you'll find yourself listening more carefully to the sounds around you, wondering whether you might be missing subtle environmental phenomena that others can perceive. Perhaps you'll think differently about the relationship between technology and nature, about the hidden costs of our modern electromagnetic environment. Or perhaps you'll simply remember that mystery still exists in our world, that there are phenomena beyond our current ability to explain or control. The Taos hum reminds us that we live in a world of infinite complexity and wonder, where the boundaries between the known and unknown are constantly shifting. It challenges us to remain curious, compassionate, and humble in the face of experiences that differ from our own. And it invites us to consider the possibility that reality may be far stranger and more mysterious than we ever imagined. So the next time you find yourself in a quiet place, perhaps you'll pause and listen carefully to the sounds around you. Who knows what mysteries you might discover in the silence? The story of the Taos hum is far from over, and perhaps, just perhaps, you might become part of the next chapter in this ongoing mystery. Until then, the hum continues, persistent and unexplained, reminding us that there are still secrets hidden in the world around us, waiting to be discovered. Final word count, approximately 7,500 words total runtime, approximately 60 plus minutes.